Back when I was a teenager, I was living in my dad's basement. He was always out of town on business trips, leaving me home alone for up to a week at a time. So, there I was, one spring evening, chilling alone, watching TV at 2 a.m. My eyes were getting heavy, and as I was starting to doze off on the sofa, I suddenly heard footsteps outside of the house. Not just one set of footsteps, but two. They started from the front yard, circling around the side, and made their way to the backyard. Now, I had all my lights on, and it hit me. I couldn't see what was going on outside, but anyone out there could totally see me. I freaked out. I turned off the TV and jumped up to hit the lights, leaving me in the dark all alone in the basement. I kept thinking, who would come by my house at this time? I never invited any of my friends over, even when I had the house all to myself. Obviously, whoever was out there was up to no good. I stayed crouched down behind the sofa in the dark for what felt like an eternity, but I didn't notice any more sounds. So, I summoned the courage to sneak upstairs to get a better look. Thankfully, all the lights upstairs were already off. I quietly navigated towards the kitchen in the dark. The problem was, the setup of the bushes and patio umbrella created these massive blind spots right where the footsteps stopped. I considered calling 911, but then I thought about my dad finding out. I knew he'd force me to stay at my aunt's place whenever he was out of town if he thought leaving me home alone wasn't safe. So I stared out of the kitchen window, looking at the deck, waiting to see movement for at least 10 minutes. It was dead quiet. I then start to think that maybe I was just dreaming of hearing footsteps outside the house. I decided to go outside to investigate. I grabbed the closest thing to a weapon I could find, an old shepherd's axe that was in the closet. With the axe in my hands, I slowly made my way out of the front door and crept along the side of the house, crouching behind a bush. I waited another 2 minutes with my eyes and ears on full alert. At this point, I wasn't expecting anyone to be in the backyard, so I decided to run up and swing the axe into the bush, shouting, "Hey!" Nobody jumped out of the bush. Instead, I hear the sound of deck chairs scraping on wood and 2 sets of footsteps running off into the opposite direction. My heart stopped. I felt like I blacked out for a second from the adrenaline rush. I dropped the axe and ran back around the side of my house in the direction I came. I made it to my front door, swung it open, rushed inside, slammed it shut, and stood there in the darkness, practically hyperventilating. I stared out into the street, waiting to see someone leaving the property, but no one did. It was then that I realized that I wasn't safe inside my house like I thought I would be. If the 2 intruders came back for me, I would be trapped. I ran out the front door into the middle of the street where I could scream if I saw someone. Surely by now, I should have called the cops, but I wasn't thinking clearly anymore, if I ever was. I was facing my house, but I still didn't see anyone, so I glanced down the street to my left. I didn't see anything. Then I looked right. That's when I saw 2 male figures walking away from me, a block and a half down the street. Just as soon as I noticed them, they turned left at the junction onto the main road and disappeared out of sight. For some reason, I ran after them, and when I turned that corner, no one was there. There should have been nowhere to go, and they would have only made it about a half a block if they were just walking. They must have had a car waiting there. I never told my dad what happened, and from that point on, I always made sure to turn off all the lights and lock all the doors and windows whenever I was alone at night. Growing up, I was a hardcore skeptic and never believed in ghosts, but something that happened to me just recently made me rethink my stance on the paranormal. I went on a vacation trip with my best friend. To save money, we shared a room. That's when I found out that I have a really bad case of sleep talking. I was always the first one to fall asleep, and on the first night, she said I was mumbling something while she was watching TV, which she found to be funny. But as the days went on, it started to get worse. One night, she woke up in the middle of the night to me laughing hysterically. On other nights, I would be shouting in my sleep like I was scolding someone or something like that. Whenever she would wake me up, I of course would have no recollection of me doing that. She even recorded me sleep talking one night. Of course, I was embarrassed with what happened. It bothered me when we got back home from our trip. At first, I thought maybe it was something to do with the trip that triggered my sleep talking. But I didn't want to go through this again in case I have to share a room with someone in the future. One night, I decided to download a sleep talk recorder app on my phone to track my sleep talking. Basically, it only records when it hears sounds. So the next morning when I woke up, I checked the recordings on my phone. It was a bunch of 8 to 20 second sound clips, usually of me rolling around in my sleep, with some clips of me saying something. I decided to keep using the app until it recorded me laughing or shouting, so I could show it to the psychologist or neurologist I was planning on visiting soon. Then one night, I was home alone, my parents were out, and my brother decided to spend the night at a friend's house. It was a usual night, nothing out of the ordinary. It was around 11:45 p.m. when I turned on the app and went to sleep. In the morning when I woke up, I immediately grabbed my phone to start listening to the recordings. At first, it was the usual sound of me tossing and turning and mumbling. Then, on the 8th recording, which was around 4 a.m., I heard something that I totally was not expecting: the sound of my bedroom door opening. This was followed by a pair of heavy footsteps walking up to my bed. As the steps got closer, I could hear heavy breathing as well. The footsteps stopped right next to my bed, but the breathing kept going. What really freaked me out was that the breathing got really loud, as if the person or thing bent forward and was right over me or my phone. This went on for a few seconds, then the footsteps starting retreating back to the door and closed it. I panicked. The first thing that came to my mind was a burglar was in the house last night. So I got out of bed and started checking my room to see if anything was missing, but everything was there. I ran outside of my room to check the rest of the house. Everything seemed to be in place and nothing was missing. I checked all of the doors and windows, but all of them were closed and locked. I then called my brother to see if he came by the house and entered my room last night. He said he was at his friend's house all night. I let my family listen to the creepy sound clip when they came home. None of us have an explanation for what happened. I'm starting to think it was a ghost, since there was no signs of entry in my house when I checked. I live in a slightly rural spot, a place with meth labs scattered around and where people pretty much keep to themselves. One night, after about midnight, I heard banging on my door. I thought it was my boyfriend coming over for a late night booty call, as he usually does whenever my parents aren't home. I made my way through the dimly lit hallway towards the entrance. When I got to the front door, I looked through the small glass window, expecting to see my boyfriend standing outside. But instead of my boyfriend, I saw the side of an unfamiliar bearded face. He didn't see me, so I backed away from the door. I was shocked, asking myself, who is this man banging on my door at midnight? My house was in a cellular dead zone, so I knew my cell was useless. I grabbed the landline next to my bed to call 911, but the line was dead. It was just like a horror movie, where the killer cuts the phone line. Meanwhile, the guy was still pounding away at the door and slurring, "Let me in." Knowing that I no longer could call the police to my house, I panicked and started thinking of ways to defend myself. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest chef knife I could find in the drawer, then ran to the bathroom to lock myself in. The door to my bathroom is flimsy, and I was pretty sure the man outside could knock down the door with 1 or 2 good kicks. I stood on the edge of the tub behind the shower curtain, figuring I might have a chance if I jumped on him from above and stabbed him between the neck and shoulder once he busted down the door. I was terrified, but also had no choice but to stick with my plan, so I waited. He started working his way around the outside of the house. I could hear him sliding his hands along the siding and banging his fists against the walls. I kept playing over and over in my head how I was going to attack him once he made his way to where I was, but then I realized my phone hadn't been charged in days. Maybe one of the other headsets still worked. I never felt more fear than the moment when I climbed down from my hiding spot, unlocked the bathroom door, and went in searching for a second handset, all while a madman was moving around the outside of my house, violently trying to unlock every door and window. I found the headset, and it worked. I dialed 911, but the closest officer was over 15 minutes away. I was told to stay on the line, but locked myself in the bathroom again, so I crawled my way back to the bathroom, hoping the man wouldn't see me through any of the windows, and locked myself in the bathroom to wait on the police. That was the longest 15 minutes of my life. When the police arrived, they had me come out of my house to identify the intruder. I then see this drunk, dirty hippie kid in handcuffs. Yes, that's him, I told the officers. Apparently, there had been a party down the road. He got disoriented and thought my house was his friend's house. He was trying to get back inside the party. The whole ordeal lasted for about 20 minutes, but it was 20 minutes of pure terror that I will never forget.